Now, we had said that the values of var variables can be changed. So let's try and do so. So here, we add 40 to the original number of this variable whole number and then assign the new value to the variable whole number itself. Let's run the program and look at the output. Yes, the new value of whole number is printed now. So, let's change the values of the other variables too. Now, if you notice here, we have not changed the types of values that we assigned to these variables in the first place. So for example, this variable had an integer value here and has an integer value here too. Similarly, this variable has a decimal number as its value at both these places. And it's the same for the sentence and boolean variable too. What does this mean? Can we not change the type of value that has been assigned to a variable once? Well, let's try to do so. So here, let's change the value of this variable from integer to a decimal number. Now if you see, the IDE marks this with a red underline. This red underline is the IDE's way of telling us that something is wrong. So let's hover over it and see what it says. So here, the IDE says that type mismatch required int found double. This means that the variable whole number is of the type integer and it does not support the value whose type is double. We will look at the meaning of type double and integer in just a minute, but let us complete this section first. So you see that the IDE is checking the type of these variables before we even run the program, and it is pointing out errors. What this error statement is trying to tell us here is that once a variable stores some kind of value, we cannot store a different kind of value in it later. This is what is meant by statically typed language. Does this term ring a bell? Yes, we discussed it in the last topic and told you that we will come back to it. Revisit the definition of statically typed language in topic 1 and see if the definition makes sense to you now. So now, let's come back to the type double and type integer. Well, these are known as data types. So, what are data types? As the name suggests, they refer to the type of data. And by now you must have understood that each variable has a data type. In technical terms, we can say that in computer programming, a data type or type is an attribute of data which tells the compiler how the programmer intends to use the data. This means that you tell the Kotlin compiler that I have declared this variable as a particular type and I will be using this variable to store such values only. But wait, while we were declaring these variables, we did not tell the compiler how we intend to use them. Then how did it know? This is the magic of Kotlin. And it is known as type inference. Again, we mentioned this term in the previous topic. Let's see what we mean by type inference. So let's look at this variable fractional number here. Now here, by initializing this variable with a decimal number, the compiler automatically understood that we want to use this variable to store a decimal number, and hence this variable is of decimal type. This property of Kotlin that lets it understand the data type of a variable automatically is known as type inference. This means that we do not need to tell the compiler explicitly that we want this data type for this variable. The compiler is smart and understands this on its own. Super cool, right? Now let's look at some data types used in Kotlin. Here is a list of all the data types that are used in Kotlin. We have seen most of them already. Int data type has integer values, both positive and negative. Double data type has decimal numbers. Boolean data type has only two values, either true or false. Character data type has characters. String data type has a sequence of characters like words, sentences, etc. Float data type has decimal numbers. Double and float may seem very similar to you right now, but we will look at their differences just a moment later. Now let's go back to the IDE where we had declared variables and identify them according to their data types. These are variables with integer data types. These variables have double data type. These variables have Boolean data type. And these have string data type. Now, let us declare variables with character data type. This is how we do it. If you see, we use double quotes to declare strings and single quotes to declare characters. Remember this well since we will be using a lot of string variables in this training. Now, let's declare variables with float data type. This is how we do it. Now if you see, the only difference between this double data type and this float data type is the character f. Here is a small activity for you. Go online and search for the differences between double and float data types in Kotlin. So that was all about data types. Now, we have tried to change the values of these var variables, but not of the variables with val keyword, right? We know that we cannot change these values, but learning code is all about trying new things. So let's change their values and see what happens. So, we have changed the value of this variable here. But look, the IDE again shows some error by underlining this in red. Let's hover over it and see what it says. So here, the IDE says that val cannot be reassigned. That is what we know too. So, we have established that we really cannot change the values of val variables. Now, we have looked at the syntax for declaring variables. But there is one more method in which variables can be declared. This is the second syntax that can be used for declaring variables in Kotlin. So if you see, in this new syntax, we have added a colon after the identifier and then the data type for this variable. Now let's declare a few variables by using this new syntax. That's how we do it. But you must be wondering that why do we need to give the data type of the variable when the compiler can detect it on its own? Yes, you're partially right. We do not need to do it. But sometimes we use variables without initializing them. That is, without giving them an initial value. And it is then that we need to tell the data type of the variable to the compiler. Don't worry if you do not relate much to this at the moment. We will revisit it when we actually get to coding. So that was all about variables. Click next whenever you are ready.